Nobody runs cricket. If you've followed me for any period of time, you will know that this is my favorite phrase in cricket. Well, it's actually, maybe it's my least favorite phrase, but I use it a lot. Like if you're on the podcast, almost any time a news story comes up, I'm going to be talking about this. Like when Ben Stokes would say things like, oh, someone's really got to fix this. I'm sorry, Ben, nobody runs cricket. Some fans will get in touch and be like, oh, I've got a way of fixing the global calendar and everything. And can I run it by you, Jarrod? Nobody runs cricket. What's happening with disability cricket these days? It doesn't seem that big at the moment. Nobody runs cricket. I have said this phrase so many times that I am bored of it myself, but it is true. So I mention this because we just had a report that came out that basically says, almost verbatim, nobody runs cricket. That report is from the World Cricket Association, which is the players' union, the tension it. And they have basically got together and said exactly what I've been saying over and over again in this report, which there's lots of interesting things from the report. But let's be honest, when it comes down to it, what they are really saying is nobody runs cricket. But there are a lot of things happening in cricket at the moment. And I think this report and the union itself might have a lot to do with that. Because nobody runs cricket, but maybe some people want to.
As a cricket journalist, I would travel sometimes up to 200 days a year. I loved watching cricket games. I loved going to new countries. It was an absolute dream. But there was one thing I hated more than anything else about it, and it was this little pin. The thing that I need to change my SIM card in every new country. The absolute worst thing about this pin and SIM cards is when I was traveling to the West Indies, of having to arrive in every new island or country and having to work out if I could still find this pin and then line up and get my SIM card in every single airport. Well, now we have the answer thanks to Sally. They can make it so you never have to worry about this nonsense ever again. They use an eSIM app that once you install once, it is easy, simple, and cheap. Oh, and it works in more than 160 countries. And you can throw these pins away forever because now you just need to download the Sally app before your trip. And if you do it with our code, Good Areas, you get an exclusive 15% discount on Sally eSIM data plans. So before your next holiday or work trip or any time you have to travel to another country, download the Sally app and use the code Good Areas, or one word, at checkout, and you can travel like a pro with Sally.
I want to go back on the story that happened a couple of weeks ago. Neil Maxwell, who most of you had never heard of until the whole Saudi thing came about, was in the news. And as we've talked about quite a bit, Neil Maxwell is Pat Cummins' agent, right? So these two are linked, and they're not just like a normal agent-client relationship. I think that they have been together for a very long time. They're more like business partners than agents at this point. But this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Because of course, Neil Maxwell has been linked to this, let's call this the Saudi Slam. Because I haven't come up with a better name and I haven't heard anyone else call it. So let's call it the Saudi Slam. It should be the Saudi Slam. I'm not saying I want Saudi Arabia in cricket or I want this to happen. But if they are in cricket and it does happen, I want it to be called the Saudi Slam. And of course, the Saudi Slam is directly related to Saudi Arabia, the country, the wealth fund, whatever you want to call it, right? So Neil Maxwell has certainly been dealing with the Saudi Slam probably for some time now, based on when the original reports came out. And that means he's been dealing with Saudi Arabia directly. But there's been something in my head the whole time that I haven't quite gotten over. I've written the word image here. I don't know if image is the right thing. It could be morals, it could be beliefs, or whatever that may be. But Pat Cummins, for a major athlete, has real strong views about who sponsors him and who he's involved with, and has made it very clear that he's not like a normal athlete that will just take the first check that comes in. So if you're really, really image conscious and your agent is suddenly working with the Saudis, does that fit? Does that make sense? And I'm not 100% sure it does. But let's just park that for one moment here. Not only is Neil Maxwell involved with Pat Cummins, he's also been involved with the player unions for quite some time. Specifically, the Australian Players Union, which is the most important one as it is the founding member and kind of founded player unions in cricket twice, right? And so Neil Maxwell is at once linked to the Saudi Slam and the Australian Cricketers Association, which he's like a lifetime member of, or something like that. And this is the founding member, as I said, of the World Cricket Association. the players' union around the world. It's not every team in the world, but obviously there's quite a few here. So we know that Neil Maxwell is linked to the players' unions and Neil Maxwell is linked to Saudi Arabia. But how do we know that he's linked to Saudi Arabia? Neil Maxwell didn't come out and say, I'm doing a deal with Saudi Arabia and I'm trying to get cricket up. No, it was leaked. It was Chris Barrett who did that story. My question is, not so much who leaked it, but why was it leaked? And this is where I think we can get a little bit more interesting. I am not saying the leak came from the players' union. Not at all. All I would say is this. In 2014, I was leaked information about the Rebel League. And several other times in my life, I've also been linked to information. A lot of those leaks have come from this organization or others that have been linked to them. Specifically, when I got the 2014 league, it was someone who had been involved in this organization and this organization. And not only that, it was also someone who was involved in this report. So we found out about this league because of a leak. It might have been an unintentional leak. Chris Barrett is a very good journalist. He might have got some breadcrumbs and made of it what he would. And Dan Brennick had also already been reporting on the Saudi stuff. So it's very possible that the Age Sydney Morning Herald guys just got together and did this. It's also very possible that there was a leak and it was intentional. But your next question might be, why would they leak it? And to understand that, I think we have to talk about the leak, but also the report. That article that Chris Barrett wrote that completely changed the way we think about Saudi Arabian cricket was less than 2 weeks ago. And within about a week and a half of that story being broken, we have a report by the World Cricket Association that basically says that no one runs cricket and it needs to be run better, step by step, maybe even directly affecting how the ICC is run. Now, it could be completely circumstance that just a week and a half before this report came out, there was a big leak. It's possible. This isn't the Illuminati. In fact, even the Illuminati is not the Illuminati, but that's a point for another time. Let's just focus in on the Saudis again here for a minute. Remember, the Saudis tried to buy the IPL, or at least a very, very big stake in it. And so in the end, they sponsored it. And we also know that the Saudis have been looking into ways to work with the BCCI through the IPL, but just in general as well. One other thing worth mentioning here is that the Saudis also own a piece of Jio or Reliance. That means that not only do the Saudis have a direct relationship with the IPL and the BCCI, they have a very close relationship with the Ambanis. And the Ambanis now own what? 30% of cricket? Maybe more, I don't know. But Cricinfo, various teams around the world, I think they've got a stake in Dream 11, in Fan Code, anywhere else you go. And not only that, but we also know that the Ambanis are interested in the IOC as well. So this is no longer just a family who wanted to buy an IPL franchise. They are literally a lot bigger than that. But let's just stop for 1 second. So the Ambanis are probably the most important owners in the IPL. Let's just twist this up a little bit here. You'll see I've got the word test written here. And you might have been looking at it the whole time and going, that's weird. There's a few things that are weird from the original Chris Barrett story on the Saudis. One is that test cricket is mentioned. And the other is that $500 million is not that much money. And why would the Saudi Slam be related to test cricket? That brings us back to the league. What if the purpose of the league wasn't really to have a Saudi Slam? What if the purpose of the league was partly to put pressure on using the report and also build a further relationship with the Saudi government? 500 million is not a lot. They spend more than that on about 4 golfers, right? Why is test cricket being mentioned here? There's a lot of unanswered questions. When you read the report, and there's lots of pages, you don't have to do this. But if you do, essentially, more or less, they are saying that they want to overthrow the ICC. Now, that's not exactly what they're saying because they're just a players' association and they can't say that. But if you did want to overthrow the ICC, and frankly, if you're a cricket fan and you haven't thought about it, what are you doing with your life? What would you need to do? I suppose you'd want someone with lots of money, maybe someone who even had a direct relationship with the ICC already on board. You'd obviously want someone who's an expert in cricket administration. Maybe someone who also already had access to that money. You would want the players on board. You would also probably want all the information about how badly cricket is run, or the fact that nobody runs cricket, out in public and getting more attention than it normally would. You also probably wouldn't want it to look like a rebel league. So again, if the people who had money already had a link to that organization, that would probably be a better place to start. Then you'd be interested in having the most powerful people in cricket involved. But maybe it's not them. maybe it is this organisation over here now. An organisation that already controls so much of cricket, is such a big part of the IPL, and also happens to own one of the biggest cricket publications in the world. So if nobody runs cricket, you might be asking, well then what is the ICC? Over the last few years, the ICC has moved from being the governing body of the game, and I would argue they were never really the governing body of the game, but they were at least pretending for a little while, into an events company. The ICC is essentially World Cups. They make a lot of money, but the IPL can make more money. If you can get players from the IPL to the Saudi Slam, trademark, you potentially can make more money from these two leagues over, let's say, an 8 and 9 month period every year than you could from any World Cups. You would still have time in the calendar to play test series. You could make your own rebel version of a World Cup. And, of course, cricket would be at the Olympics. So when the original story came out, I had lots of issues with the Saudi Slam. Partly because I didn't really understand how the money was going to work. And also, the key relationships hadn't been there. But what if the Saudi Slam is just the opening salvo in what is really going to happen here, which is the ICC, as it currently exists, is going to be overthrown? Now, let's be honest. I'm just a man in a tinfoil hat. I would go and get a tinfoil hat if I could be bothered, just to continue this video. My guess is there are a few players involved who aren't that interested in playing in Saudi Arabia. But what if Saudi Arabia just sponsored all of cricket? The IPL, some sort of extra league as well, maybe test cricket as well. You end up with your own rebel versions of World Cups, and you have people who already own so much of cricket involved as well. Am I taking a big leap based on the fact that there was a leak just before there was a report? Does the ICC even need to be overthrown if nobody runs cricket? I honestly don't know. But there are two things I absolutely know for sure. Nobody runs cricket, and there is a lot going on in cricket right now.
It took God and the demon to build international cricket, but don't tell Johnny Best that. 1882, Australia had played one test in England against the god W.G. Grace, and they sucked. So they were playing him again, and it was a tough wicket. But England was in front, so Australia was desperate for a third innings lead. At number 8 was young all-rounder Sammy Jones. After a routine single, he walks down to do some gardening on the pitch. Grace whips off the bails and appeals. The ball wasn't dead, Jones was run out. The Australians were furious. In fact, some of the English players were also furious. But what Grace said went, and the umpires had already given it. Next in was Fred Spofforth. He was known as the Demon Fast Bowler. He was furious, and he let England know exactly what was coming next, which was maiden. There's 12 maidens. I can't count them all. England only needed 85 to win. W.G. Grace made 32. England only 77. That was the test where the Ashes began. Buy my book, Overthrowing Cricket's Empire, on Amazon today.